Before you trust anyone, understand one uncomfortable truth. People almost never reveal who they truly are when you first meet them. They reveal who they need you to believe they are. The real person exists beneath the smile, beneath the confidence, beneath the carefully chosen words and calculated acts of kindness. Most people never discover that hidden person, not because it is impossible to see, but because they become emotionally invested before they become observant. They fall in love with potential instead of paying attention to patterns. They trust promises instead of watching behavior. And by the time reality finally arrives, the damage has already been done. Think about the greatest betrayals you have witnessed. They rarely happened overnight. They were built quietly, one unnoticed decision at a time. Every lie had a smaller lie before it. Every act of disloyalty began with a habit of selfishness that nobody wanted to acknowledge. Every manipulator first appeared as someone unusually charming, unusually understanding, unusually eager to earn confidence. People rarely become dangerous without leaving clues. The tragedy is that most people ignore those clues because they are searching for comfort instead of truth. The world does not reward those who trust quickly. It rewards those who observe patiently. Every person who enters your life brings an invisible world with them, a world filled with ambitions, fears, insecurities, desires, and private motivations. Those invisible forces influence every decision they make. If you cannot recognize what drives a person beneath the surface, then you are not seeing the person at all. You are only seeing the role they have chosen to perform. The greatest mistake is believing that words reveal character. Words reveal intelligence. They reveal education, they reveal confidence, but they do not reveal integrity. Integrity is found in what someone does when keeping their promise becomes inconvenient. Anyone can speak about honesty while honesty costs nothing. Anyone can speak about loyalty when there is nothing to lose. Character begins where comfort ends. Notice how quickly people describe themselves. They tell you they are loyal, kind, hardworking, trustworthy, humble, but real character never needs to introduce itself. It appears naturally through repeated action. The individual who constantly announces their honesty often feels the greatest need to convince others. The person who truly possesses strength rarely spends time proving it. They simply live it. Train yourself to become fascinated by behavior instead of appearances. Observe how someone reacts when they do not get what they want. Observe them when they lose an argument. Observe them when another person's success fills the room. Envy has a language of its own. It hides behind forced smiles, quiet criticism, sarcastic compliments, and subtle attempts to diminish achievement. Most people miss these signals because they only hear the words. The wise learn to study what emotions are speaking behind those words. One conversation tells you almost nothing. One emotional moment can be misleading, but patterns never lie. Human beings are creatures of habit. They repeat emotional responses, decision-making styles, and relationship behaviors again and again. Someone who repeatedly avoids responsibility will eventually avoid responsibility with you. Someone who repeatedly blames others will one day blame you. Someone who repeatedly betrays confidence has already shown you what they will do when the opportunity presents itself again. This is why patience is one of the greatest forms of intelligence. Time removes masks. Maintaining an image requires energy. Pretending to be generous, patient, disciplined, or compassionate becomes exhausting over weeks and months. Eventually, people relax into who they truly are. They stop editing themselves. They stop remembering every detail of the character they were trying to play. Reality quietly replaces performance. Many people fear silence because silence creates exposure. During conversations, resist the temptation to fill every pause. Let the other person speak. Let them become comfortable enough to continue talking. People often reveal more while trying to avoid silence than they ever intended to reveal through direct questioning. They explain themselves without being asked. They defend decisions nobody challenged. They reveal priorities they believed were hidden. Silence is not empty. Silence is a mirror, and many people cannot stand looking into it. Another mistake people make is confusing familiarity with trust. Sharing hobbies, interests, opinions, or backgrounds creates comfort, but comfort is not proof of character. Two people may enjoy the same books, pursue the same goals, and laugh at the same jokes while living by completely different moral principles. Similarity creates connection. Principles determine whether that connection deserves your trust. Watch how people behave around those who cannot offer them anything. Observe how they treat waiters, receptionists, cleaners, strangers, and employees. Respect shown only toward powerful people is not respect. It is strategy. The individual who becomes rude the moment they believe someone has lower status is quietly revealing how they understand power. If circumstances ever change, you may one day receive that same treatment. Human beings often expose themselves through the stories they repeatedly tell. Listen carefully whenever someone explains why every failed relationship was someone else's fault. Listen when every workplace was unfair, every friend was jealous, every misunderstanding was caused by another person. A life without personal responsibility is not a life without mistakes. It is a life where the ego has become more important than reality. Someone unwilling to admit small faults will almost never admit larger ones. One of the greatest weaknesses you can possess is the desire to believe everyone is exactly who they claim to be. Optimism without observation becomes vulnerability. There is nothing wrong with believing in the goodness of people, but goodness should never replace awareness. You can remain compassionate without becoming naive. You can remain kind without surrendering your judgment. Your emotions are often the easiest doorway through which manipulation enters your life. Someone who understands your need for approval can flatter you into lowering your defenses. Someone who recognizes your loneliness can manufacture false closeness. Someone who sees your ambition can tempt you with impossible opportunities. Every emotional hunger creates a point of influence. The more deeply you understand your own needs, the more difficult it becomes for others to exploit them. The strongest observers begin by studying themselves. They ask difficult questions. Why did this compliment affect me so deeply? Why do I want this person's approval? Why am I ignoring these uncomfortable feelings? Self-awareness protects you more effectively than suspicion ever could. A person who understands their own emotional patterns becomes remarkably difficult to deceive because they recognize when desire begins replacing judgment. Never underestimate the importance of consistency. A single act of generosity proves very little. A single apology proves very little. A single impressive conversation proves almost nothing. Character is not measured in isolated moments. It is measured in repeated choices made over long periods of time. Consistency transforms isolated behavior into reliable evidence. That evidence becomes the foundation upon which trust should be built. Manipulation often disguises itself as urgency. Someone pressures you to decide immediately. They insist that hesitation means weakness or distrust. They tell you opportunities disappear unless you act now. But truth is never threatened by careful examination. Honest intentions survive questions. Honest relationships survive patience. Falsehood depends upon speed because speed leaves no room for observation. Most people become emotionally attached before they become intellectually convinced. They allow attraction, excitement, admiration, or shared dreams to replace careful evaluation. Once emotions become invested, the mind begins working like a lawyer instead of a judge. Instead of searching for truth, it searches for reasons to defend an emotional decision that has already been made. This is why intelligent people sometimes make remarkably poor judgments about character. Intelligence alone cannot overcome emotional attachment. Every relationship eventually reaches a moment where convenience and integrity collide. Someone will have the opportunity to choose between protecting themselves and protecting the relationship. That moment reveals more than years of pleasant conversation ever could. Loyalty is not proven during comfort, it is proven during sacrifice. Respect is not proven during agreement, it is proven during disagreement. Integrity is not proven when honesty is easy, it is proven when dishonesty offers an advantage. Most people believe trust begins with words. They listen carefully to promises, confident declarations, heartfelt apologies, and impressive stories, assuming these are reliable indicators of character. But words are the easiest part of human behavior to control. A person can rehearse a speech, prepare an explanation, or create an image that sounds convincing. Behavior is far more difficult to manufacture because it must remain consistent over time. This is why the wisest people never place their confidence in promises alone. They place it in patterns. A promise is made in a moment. A pattern is built through repeated choices. One reflects intention, the other reveals identity. Think about how often people introduce themselves through descriptions rather than demonstrations. They say they are honest, loyal, hardworking, compassionate, or dependable. Yet these qualities cannot be confirmed in a single conversation. Anyone can claim to possess virtues that have never truly been tested. Real character only appears when circumstances become uncomfortable. It is easy to speak about honesty when telling the truth carries no cost. It is easy to promise loyalty when there is no temptation to leave. It is easy to appear patient when life is calm. The true measure of a person begins when keeping those values requires sacrifice. That is why you must become a careful observer rather than a quick believer. Every interaction gives you information if you are willing to pay attention. Instead of asking whether someone sounds trustworthy, ask whether their actions consistently support their words. Do they arrive when they say they will? Do they keep small commitments as carefully as large ones? Do they treat people with respect even when there is nothing to gain? These small moments may seem insignificant, but together they create a pattern that is almost impossible to fake forever. Human beings naturally repeat their habits. The way someone handles responsibility today is often the way they will handle responsibility tomorrow. The way they respond to conflict with others is likely the way they will respond to conflict with you. Many people ignore these early signals because they assume they will be the exception. They believe that someone who has lied to others will somehow remain truthful with them, or that someone who repeatedly breaks promises will suddenly become reliable simply because the relationship feels special. But habits rarely change because circumstances change. They change only when the person chooses to transform themselves, and genuine transformation is far less common than people imagine. Patterns reveal priorities. Every repeated action tells you what a person values most. If someone consistently chooses convenience over responsibility, they are showing you their priorities. If they repeatedly avoid accountability, they are revealing how they protect themselves when mistakes occur. If they regularly speak negatively about people who are not present, they are demonstrating how they handle trust behind closed doors. These behaviors are not isolated incidents. They are pieces of a larger picture. When viewed together, they tell a story that words alone never could. Many people become trapped because they focus on isolated moments instead of recurring behavior. A single act of generosity impresses them. One emotional apology erases months of disappointment. One inspiring conversation makes them forget countless warning signs, but isolated moments can be carefully chosen. Patterns cannot. A person may succeed in pretending once or twice, but maintaining an identity that does not match their true character eventually becomes exhausting. Time removes the energy required to maintain appearances. What remains is the person's natural way of thinking, speaking, and acting. Patience is therefore one of the greatest forms of protection. When you rush to trust someone, you deny yourself the opportunity to observe enough evidence. You make decisions based on emotions instead of experience. Excitement, admiration, loneliness, or hope can create the illusion that you already know someone deeply, even when you have only encountered the version they wanted you to see. Time exposes the difference between temporary performance and lasting character. The longer you observe someone, the more difficult it becomes for them to hide consistent habits. This principle applies in every area of life. In friendships, observe whether someone remains supportive when they have nothing to gain. In business, notice whether they honor small agreements before trusting them with larger responsibilities. In romantic relationships, pay attention to how they handle disappointment, disagreement, and responsibility rather than becoming distracted by affection alone. Love may create connection, but trust must still be earned through consistent behavior. One of the clearest patterns to watch is how people respond when circumstances no longer favor them. Anyone can appear pleasant when life is going well. The true test comes when they experience frustration, failure, criticism, or disappointment. Do they become respectful under pressure, or do they immediately blame others? Do they accept responsibility for mistakes, or do they search for excuses? Stress has a way of revealing qualities that comfort keeps hidden. It strips away carefully maintained appearances and exposes the habits that truly guide a person's decisions. Another important pattern is consistency across different environments. Some individuals behave respectfully toward those with influence while dismissing those they consider unimportant. Others remain kind regardless of status, wealth, or position. This difference speaks volumes. Character should not depend on who is watching or what rewards are available. A person who changes their values according to the audience is revealing that their principles are negotiable. A person who behaves consistently everywhere demonstrates that their actions are guided by internal standards rather than external approval. It is equally important to notice how someone speaks about the people who are absent. Conversations about others often reveal more about the speaker than about the subject itself. A person who constantly spreads gossip, shares private information, or criticizes everyone around them is quietly revealing how they understand loyalty. Even if you are not currently the target, the pattern already exists. Eventually, when circumstances change, that same behavior may be directed toward you. Trust should never be built on the hope that you will somehow become the exception to an established habit. Do not allow charm to distract you from observation. Some people possess remarkable social skills. They know exactly what to say, how to create emotional connection, and how to make others feel valued. These abilities are not inherently negative, but they should never replace evidence. Genuine trust grows from repeated demonstrations of honesty, responsibility, and respect, not from persuasive conversations or impressive personalities. A charming individual with inconsistent behavior is far less trustworthy than a quiet individual whose actions remain dependable year after year. The strongest relationships are never built on blind faith. They are built on accumulated proof. Every fulfilled commitment strengthens confidence. Every responsible decision adds another layer of reliability. Every moment of integrity under pressure reinforces the belief that this person can be trusted again. In this way, trust becomes something earned through evidence rather than granted through emotion. The moment you begin valuing patterns above promises, your judgment becomes clearer. You stop being influenced by temporary emotions and start paying attention to lasting realities. Instead of asking whether someone sounds convincing, you begin asking whether their history supports their claims. Instead of being impressed by grand declarations, you become interested in ordinary habits repeated over time. That shift changes everything because patterns rarely deceive. They reveal who a person chooses to be every single day, and those repeated choices always speak louder than even the most convincing promises. Before you can understand the intentions of others, you must first understand the forces that influence your own decisions. This may seem unrelated to reading people, but it is the foundation of every accurate judgment. The greatest obstacle to seeing others clearly is not their ability to deceive you. It is your own tendency to see what you want to see. Human beings rarely become blind because someone else hides the truth. More often, they become blind because their emotions persuade them to ignore it. If your desire for approval is stronger than your commitment to truth, then even the clearest warning signs will appear insignificant. Every person carries invisible needs. Some crave acceptance. Others crave admiration, security, affection, recognition, or control. These desires are not weaknesses by themselves. They are simply part of being human. The problem begins when you become unaware of them. An unrecognized desire quietly takes control of your decisions. Instead of evaluating people objectively, you begin evaluating them according to how well they satisfy your emotional needs. You trust the person who makes you feel important. You overlook the flaws of the person who gives you attention. You defend the actions of someone simply because losing them feels more painful than accepting reality. This is why self-awareness is more powerful than suspicion. You can spend your entire life trying to identify manipulators, but if you never understand your own emotional triggers, someone will eventually discover them before you do. Manipulation succeeds not because it is always sophisticated, but because it finds an existing weakness and quietly builds upon it. The individual who constantly seeks praise becomes vulnerable to flattery. The person who fears loneliness becomes vulnerable to false companionship. The one who desperately wants success becomes vulnerable to unrealistic promises. Your greatest protection is not learning every deceptive technique. It is learning where your own judgment becomes vulnerable. Pay attention to the moments when your emotions become unusually intense. Ask yourself why a compliment affects you so deeply. Why does one person's approval seem more valuable than another's? Why do you feel the urge to trust someone you have only recently met? These questions reveal more than you might expect. Often the strongest emotional reactions are connected to unmet needs rather than objective reality. If someone fills an emotional gap in your life, you may begin assigning them qualities they have not yet earned. Your imagination starts completing a picture that evidence has not finished drawing. Patience becomes easier when you are emotionally independent. A person who is comfortable with themselves does not feel pressured to form instant relationships or immediate trust. They understand that meaningful connections are built gradually through shared experiences and consistent behavior. They do not mistake excitement for compatibility or attention for loyalty. They recognize that genuine trust grows slowly because it is built upon evidence rather than emotion. One of the most valuable habits you can develop is learning to separate feelings from facts. Feelings deserve acknowledgement, but they should never become your only guide. You may feel inspired by someone's confidence, yet confidence alone does not prove honesty. You may feel comforted by someone's kindness, yet kindness without consistency does not establish reliability. The wise person allows emotions to inform their experience but never permits emotions to replace careful observation. Your own insecurities also influence how you interpret the behavior of others. Someone who constantly doubts their worth may mistake manipulation for affection simply because they are grateful to receive attention. Another person may tolerate disrespect because they secretly believe they deserve nothing better. Until you strengthen your relationship with yourself, you will continue accepting treatment that reflects your fears instead of your value. Confidence is not believing that everyone will treat you well. Confidence is knowing you can walk away when they do not. Learning to pause before reacting is another essential discipline. Human beings naturally respond to praise with openness and to criticism with defensiveness. But immediate reactions often reveal emotional habits rather than thoughtful judgment. When someone flatters you, pause before accepting their intentions. When someone disagrees with you, pause before assuming hostility. The ability to delay your reaction creates space for reason to catch up with emotion. That brief moment of reflection often prevents decisions that would otherwise be driven by impulse. Many people confuse intuition with emotion. True intuition is not panic, excitement, or wishful thinking. It is the quiet recognition of patterns gathered through experience. Emotion shouts, intuition whispers. The challenge is that emotional noise often drowns out that quieter voice. When your mind becomes calm, you begin noticing details that previously escaped your attention. Small inconsistencies become visible. Repeated behaviors become easier to recognize. You stop being distracted by appearances and begin seeing the structure beneath them. Emotional discipline also requires accepting uncomfortable truths without immediately trying to explain them away. Suppose someone repeatedly breaks promises but always provides convincing explanations. Your emotions may encourage forgiveness because the reasons sound reasonable. Your disciplined mind, however, notices the repeated outcome rather than the repeated excuse. The explanation changes each time, but the behavior remains identical. This is why disciplined observation always gives greater weight to actions than to justifications. Another important lesson is learning not to confuse empathy with obligation. Understanding another person's struggles is valuable, but understanding does not require sacrificing your own well-being. Many individuals remain trapped in unhealthy relationships because they believe compassion means endless tolerance. Compassion allows you to understand why someone behaves a certain way. Wisdom helps you decide whether that behavior deserves continued access to your life. You can care about someone while recognizing that they are not safe to trust. Your standards become clearer as your self-respect grows. Instead of asking whether people like you begin asking whether their behavior deserves your confidence. Instead of chasing acceptance, you evaluate character. This shift transforms every relationship. Approval becomes less important than consistency. Charm becomes less impressive than reliability. Grand promises become less persuasive than repeated responsibility. Notice how often fear influences decision-making. Fear of rejection encourages people to ignore disrespect. Fear of missing opportunities causes them to rush into partnerships. Fear of being alone leads them to accept unhealthy friendships. Fear narrows perception because it focuses attention on immediate relief instead of long-term consequences. Courage expands perception by allowing you to tolerate temporary discomfort in exchange for lasting clarity. The strongest observers are rarely the loudest people in the room. They are often the calmest. They do not feel the need to impress everyone they meet. They are comfortable listening more than speaking. Because they are not occupied with managing their own image, they have greater mental space to notice the behavior of others. Observation requires attention, and attention becomes available only when your own emotions are not demanding constant satisfaction. Self-mastery also means accepting that you will occasionally misjudge people despite your best efforts. No one reads human behavior perfectly. The goal is not perfection. The goal is continuous improvement. Every experience, whether positive or painful, teaches you something about yourself and about others. Instead of becoming bitter after disappointment, become more observant. Instead of allowing betrayal to destroy your trust completely, allow it to strengthen your discernment. Experience becomes wisdom only when you are willing to learn from it rather than simply suffer through it. As your emotional discipline grows, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop searching for certainty in other people because you have built stability within yourself. You no longer feel pressured to trust quickly, prove yourself, or earn everyone's approval. Your decisions become calmer because they are no longer controlled by fear, loneliness, pride, or desperation. You begin evaluating people according to evidence instead of emotion, consistency instead of charm, and character instead of appearance. That inner clarity becomes your greatest advantage because once you master your own mind, very few people will ever be able to control it.